going on, YouTube? As you can see, I'm out back in the deer shed. When I thought about making this video, I had the idea that I was going to use my tripod to record outside. But the DOJ must have gotten a hold of it because just like the Epstein client list, my tripod has disappeared. So I guess all we can do is move along with the show. Today I'm smoking some HU Janneman Flake. I call it Janneman Flake because I'm funny. I'm going to be smoking it in my Savinelli Oceano 626. Take a look at that beautiful pipe, man. Look at that stem. I think the Oceano pipes are the most beautiful pipes on the market. The stem, I mean, look at that stem, man. The white at the base of the shank, the navy blue swirls, and the baby blue stem itself. That's a looker. I mean, there are a lot of beautiful stems out there, but I don't think anything beats the Oceano. Janneman Flake is a very good blend. If you haven't tried it, I strongly recommend it. And that's really all I have to say about the tobacco, because my palate is not profound enough to be able to really give detailed reviews of blends, but just know it's good. What brings me out here today is last night I was sitting thinking to myself, and I realized for the first time that it's been 5 years since I moved out of my mom and stepdad's place. I graduated during the COVID year, so we got out in March. I turned 18 February 2nd. We got let out of school in March, and I kind of had a gut feeling that we weren't going to be going back, and I was correct. Just a few days after we got let out of school, I took it upon myself to move out of my parents' place. And I moved in with my girlfriend at the time, which really doesn't hold any value to the story that I'm going to tell. But the reason I decided to move out, and I won't go too much into detail because for the most part, it's all water under the bridge now. But the relationship that I had with my parents at that time was real rocky. It was a real challenging situation to live in. And truthfully, I felt that the only way to overcome what was now laid before the three of us was a change of scenery. And I'd advocated for this several times over the 2 or 3 years prior, but it just never worked out. So now that I was 18 and, could make my own decisions and understood that we weren't going to be going back to school, I took it upon myself to move out. And really, in hindsight, I'd do it all over again. The relationship that I have now with my parents it's really blossomed into something that, I really appreciate, I really cherish. And the lessons that I've learned along the way, if I don't move out, I don't learn those lessons. I'm not who I am without making that decision. That was a real life-changing decision that I had made, for better or for worse. I'd obviously argue for better, even though the situation that I put myself in really wasn't that good, but for better, now I am who I am. But just realizing that it's been 5 years already. It kind of feels like it's been 5 years, but at the same time, it could have been yesterday. And in a blink of an eye, time just passes like you wouldn't believe. And as a kid, you don't realize that. People tell you, adults tell you all the time, oh, wait till you get older, time flies and it only progresses as you get older and all that. And it's, as a kid, you just kind of look at them like, what are you talking about? But then you become an adult and you witness it. Yeah. It's a little overwhelming. But when I moved out, I was working at a gas station. And fast forward about a year, I was put in a position to become the assistant manager to the store. Now, when I was a little younger, living with my parents still, college was on the table. Not really, but, college was being discussed, we'll say. And I kind of already had it in my mind I didn't want to take that route. That wasn't really my cup of tea. And I remember at one point I told quite a few other people in my family that I was pretty close with, that I wanted to pursue becoming at least assistant manager at the gas station, just to have, some sort of manager experience. At the time, it was all I knew. It was the only job I'd ever had. And, not having any sort of taste of the real world, I didn't really know much. But I knew that I wanted to try to pursue that. And, everybody kind of just, brushed it off as like, that's not something you really want to shoot towards. It's not something you really want to drive yourself towards. It's, a dead-end job that is kind of designed for teenagers, young adults, or people that are, trying to get back on their feet in some sort of, they had some sort of situation, some sort of issue come up or whatever, and they kind of fell off the horse. Now they're trying to get back on. And, it upset me a little bit, because it was something that I thought that would be beneficial to at least have a little bit experience like that under my belt. An assistant manager is what I wanted to strive for. So I move out, not because of that, but I move out and still have it in my mind that I want some sort of manager experience at the gas station before I decide to move on to something else. Now, I joked around about working there my whole life and all this different stuff. That doesn't really pertain to the story, but that was all, fugazi. I was just cracking jokes. But so an assistant manager position opens up. And me, only freshly 19, there were a couple other people in line for it. And the manager of the shop decided he was going to give it to me. So at 19 years old, I become assistant manager to the gas station after everybody kind of, laughed off the idea. So I felt pretty good about that. I became, the assistant manager to the gas station I worked at. But immediately upon getting the position, I realized that there was a deep state cabal against me. That there were people within the company, within the store that I worked, that were attempting a coup d'etat against me. Which is true. So the previous assistant manager, who I got along with very well, she was moved back to food service, where you cut the deli meat and all that crap. But she was put as like head of that department because the food service manager at the time was moved to a different store to become a manager elsewhere. So they needed somebody in the food service. They moved her. Now an assistant manager position opens up. Bam. Here we are. So there were 3 people that were up for it. Me, one of the team leads and another one of the team leads, I believe. I was not a team lead. That position had not opened up for me, but the assistant manager did, and I threw my, name in the ring just because, why not? So the previous assistant manager was really pushing hard for one of the team leads to become the assistant manager. And in hindsight, it would have made more sense to put her. She had a family, she had kids she had to take care of. The assistant manager is a little boost of money. She was older. I think she was in her late 20s, early 30s, something like that. So the previous assistant manager was really pushing hard for her. But the store manager, for whatever reason, wanted me. So he picked me. And that really, really upset the previous assistant manager. And she had told him, whenever he broke the news to her that he was going to pick me, she told him specifically that under no circumstances would she help train me for the position. Not one bit. It was completely up to him. She didn't think I deserved the position. She didn't think I was ready for the position. So she wasn't going to waste any time training me. And I caught on to this pretty early because the store manager at the time wasn't around that often. You know, he was always busy on vacation or, you know, whatever it was. He was seemingly always gone, or at least never was working when I was working. So the training was hit or miss. And I had asked around, I was like, hey, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. Why am I not, they put me in this position, but nobody's training me for it. I want to be able to do the best job that I possibly can. I want to fulfill the description of what I'm supposed to do as assistant manager on the day-to-day basis. But if nobody's training me how to do it, I can't do that. And so I had asked her something, you know, and she kind of said point blank, you know, I didn't want you to have it. And I told him I wasn't going to train you because I don't think you're ready for it. And even if you are ready for it, I don't think you're going to be here long enough for it to matter. So I'm not going to waste my time. Pretty wild. So as the weeks passed and this whole cycle continued, and I was starting to get fed up. And then my home life was very, very chaotic. So it was a very overwhelming situation that I was in, just in general, with, you know, everything going on. And I was starting to have my doubts. I was thinking about, you know, resigning. I was thinking about pulling a Richard Nixon. They were trying to hit me with Watergate. And I said, you know, this would probably just be best for America if I just put in my resignation rather than going to court and dealing with the whole impeachment crap. But about 2-3 weeks before I decided to do that, I mean, it was in my mind, but 2 or 3 weeks before I decided to do that, the previous assistant manager had kind of caved and said that she would help train me because the store manager was never around, at least not when I was there. So she finally decides to train me, or help train me. But it seemed like every single time that she trained me, there was something new that came up that was wrong. And I couldn't figure out what the issue was. She wouldn't help me figure out what the issue was. You know, every time I did something, it came out backwards. And it didn't make any sense because I had already done this stuff before, the few times I had trained with the store manager, and I had done it right for the most part. I mean, it's a learning curve, obviously. There's new paperwork and stuff you got to do, but it seemed like stuff was happening almost intentionally, and I couldn't figure out why because I wasn't doing it. The intentional mistakes, like the only way it could be explained was intentional mistakes, and I could not figure it out, and it was driving me nuts. And every time this happened, you know, we were in the little store office, which might as well have been a closet. You know, she would kind of kick me out of the office. She'd tell me she would figure it out, whatever. And then in a few minutes, she'd have it figured out and she'd come out. And I'd ask her, I said, what did I do wrong? What happened? You know, I want to be able to correct my mistakes. What was it? She would never explain it to me. So I think what had happened was that, you know, somehow, you know, she was creating problems to make me look bad. I think. I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty sure that's what was happening. Like as assistant manager, we had to count cigarettes in the store. How many cartons, how many packs, blah, blah, blah. And for the most part, when I would do it by myself, it'd come out fairly easy. It was right most of the time because all you're doing is counting. I mean, I went to Mercer High School. I know most of you watching probably don't know about Mercer High School, but, you know, they say some pretty funny stuff about Mercer High School and some of the people being dumb. I can count. I went to Mercer, but I can count for the most part. And when I would do these cigarette counts, when I do it by myself, it would come out right. But when she would help me, it would come out, you know, there would be a pack missing or a carton missing or this missing. And you had to total it to figure out how much money, you know, total money there was for cigarettes, blah, blah, blah. And when she would help me, it would always come out wrong. And she'd make me do it, again, or 2 times, 3 times, 4 times until it was right. And sometimes it would never get right. So she would just kick me out and she'd do it herself, blah, blah, blah. I think she was creating the issues for me. I think she was creating the problems to make me look bad. And I picked up on this. And at this point, I gave up. I said, this is ridiculous. We're 45, almost 50 years old, supposed to be training a 19-year-old kid, and you're throwing roadblocks at me that I can't jump over or nothing because you're designing them for that purpose. So I pulled my Richard Nixon. I said, I am not a crook, and got out of town. And then shortly after that, I, put in my 2 weeks notice, got out of the situation I was in with, my girlfriend at the time, moved out there, moved in with my grandparents. It'd be nice if I could keep this pipe lit, but that's the only thing that sucks about making these videos is you guys have to see me relight this pipe 500 times because the whole point is for me to talk. So I at least had that, managerial experience somewhat. I think I only had the position for 3 or 4 months. And I did kind of get accustomed to doing some of the stuff, but it was just such a headache to have to navigate around other people's problems. And it really turned me off. So I started working at the place I'm at now. And I've been there 3.5 years. Within the first year, the place I work now is a plastic injection molding plant. I started out just as an operator, so just putting parts in a box and, keeping the shop clean, keeping it running, stuff like that. Real simple. Within a year's time, I got a mold tech position opened up. I put my name in and got the promotion. Now, mold tech, so you make all these plastic parts. There has to be a steel mold to make all these plastic parts for the plastic material to get injected into to mold around to actually make the parts. So the mold tech position sets the molds and does all the setup for the presses, for the machines to run. Again, fairly easy. Now, I've had that position for 2.5 years now. And I've enjoyed it, but it was a similar situation where the training was a little all over the place. I mean, it was never to the point where people were setting me up for failure. By no means. But the training was just all over the place. We get busy, they need the operator, so I have to be an operator, which takes away from my time as a mold tech and training and all that stuff. And there were times where, I was starting to get a little impatient, started to feel, remembering back to what it was at, the gas station I worked at, where the training was not the same exact way, but very similar to being all over the place. And knowing that somebody tried to screw me over the first time, I couldn't help but to let it creep in again that, something wasn't right, which wasn't the case. And I didn't take it to management or whatever. I just kind of let it ride out. But my impatience was starting to build. And then finally, the shop kind of slowed down and I was able to get, a lot more mold tech experience. And now, 2.5 years later, a team lead position opens up, a manager position opens up here. And they asked me if I would like it. And I say yes. I'm not, I'm excited, but I'm not overly excited because I know that, you have to manage people. Which I don't mind because I get along with everybody at the shop. But I think that there's a part of me that remembers back to the old place at the gas station. And now seeing all this stuff with the deep state and the government, all that stupid, it's just in the back of my head that there's a cabal against me. Obviously there's not. Not anymore. So I'm happy, I'm honored, I'm humbled, to be considered for this position and to get this position. But there's a part of me that is also aware that, this is a big step. There's a lot of vulnerability here. And I welcome it. I'm not shying away from it. Otherwise, I would have said no to the position. But I think it's kind of neat that within a 5-year window, I will now have held a management position in 2 different places in a 5-year window. And now, only at 23 years old, I'm right there with my dad and uncle and stepdad in, how much money they're making. Now, that really doesn't matter much to me, because money is only as important as you let it be. And aside from just buying and paying for everyday essentials and the pipe stuff and all that, money holds no real power over me. But I think it's very neat that at 23, I'm in the same league as these guys who, I've only been working there 3.5 years, and I'm in the same, league as them, and they've been working at their places, 10, 15 years. But even with the money we're all making, the way the economy's set up, I'll tell you this, if the economy figures itself out, we're going to be rolling. But right now, if anybody's familiar with Merle Haggard, we're the snowball rolling down into hell right now. So, 5 years ago, I moved out. Within that same 5 years, I become a manager at 2 different places. The relationship that I have with my parents has blossomed into something beautiful. And I'd say that rather than, a lot of people I know, and you just hear about, a lot of them try to play the victim card. They try to use everything as an excuse for their situation. At a point in time, I had that same mentality. But now, over the last couple years, I've really used it to my advantage rather than to my disadvantage. I focused on looking back at the situations that have unfolded in my life and using them to educate myself for further situations that could be similar or just in general, just something that I can attribute that experience to another experience to build off of. Too many people nowadays try to claim that victim mentality. Oh, my parents were mean to me when I was a kid, so now I have, this, or I'm that, or all this different stuff. Okay. We all have experiences like that, brother. It doesn't make you special, so quit trying to act special. Become special by overcoming that. And it's all a mental thing. But this video is running long, so I won't get too deep in the weeds with that. So I just think it's neat. Figured I'd share it. 5 years ago. 5 years of life building here and 5 years of some pretty exciting achievements personally for myself. I hope you guys enjoyed. Happy smokes. Oceano is the most beautiful pipe in the world. Never forget that. And we'll see you guys later.